Hey, welcome back to Sociology of Cars podcast. This is your host, Jimmy XIE. You're listening to the third episode of season 2 brought to you by 0 to 60 Studios in San Dimas, California. My guests today are two driving/EV enthusiasts, Steve and Ben. Alongside me is my co-host Jade, who is also a BMW fanatic. I cannot believe that all four of us were able to gather in San Dimas today on a beautiful Saturday. Huge welcome to all of you guys in the studio today.
Thank you. It's pretty exciting to be here.
Wonderful. So Jade, I'll always know you as the guy who drives a white BMW M2 competition. But for those who don't know who you are, really briefly, what should they know about Jade?
It's hard for me to put it into words sometimes. My father was the designer and CEO of Vector Automotive, America's first supercar. He's everything to me. Aside from that, I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy in a BMW.
What about you, Steve? Who the heck are you?
First of all, I'm a family man. I've got a wife and 3 kids. I'm a huge nerd. I got an engineering degree from Caltech, and I've always worked in startups, mostly in the clean energy space. In the process of starting my own company now, making clean energy power plants for data centers. I tend to have a lot of hobbies and a lot of interests. I'm a CrossFit instructor. Obviously, I'm an EV enthusiast. That's why I'm here. You'll catch me throwing a javelin once in a while, pretending like I'm still back in my college days. I'm a big science fiction nerd. I've got a book club, a book collection. So I kind of get involved in a lot of different things, have a lot of interests.
Ben.
It's no wonder we're so compatible. I'm also married, got 2 kids. Driving is my outlet, my happy place. I also like sci-fi as well. I used to work in IT, transitioned my career a little bit into photography.
Quite a renaissance man.
Yes.
So how did your car passion start? Where you say, wow, cars are cool. I might want to get into it.
Oh, my dad, he went to med school, and I think when he became a doctor, it's just like, okay, I'm getting a Porsche now because I'm a doctor. So he got, I think, a 72 or 73 911, and it was promptly stolen. And so then he got another one. He also, once he got tired of not tired of it, but didn't want to drive the 911 every day, he got into the Thunderbird line. That's my entry into the performance car. I had a Thunderbird Super Coupe.
Got it. What about you, Steve? What was your trigger point like for your car passion?
It's interesting. I guess my relationship with cars started early. I was really interested in driving when I was a kid. I was the one that was going to get his driver's license on his 16th birthday, right? Like the day I'm at the DMV taking the test. And I always loved, as a kid, like going to the go-kart track with my brothers and just really competitive about that kind of stuff. Like I'm a hyper-competitive person in general, and something about driving cars, whether it's a go-kart or a real car, just always kind of scratched that itch for me in terms of that kind of competitive streak that I have. But then as an adult, I became a family man early. I became a father pretty young. And so I kind of put everything on hold because all my money and all my time was going to the kids. And it was only relatively recently that I thought, okay, now I've got enough free time and enough free cash these days to spend a little bit more of that energy on cars again. So I got back into it fairly recently.
Wow. So what do you get out of driving? In other words, what aspects of driving do you find fun and engaging?
Me, I guess it really all comes down to just accelerations in different directions, right? The laterals and the back being pushed into the seat is probably the primary one, and then just going around the turns and pushing something to its limit, seeing what you can make something do. I love roller coasters, anything fast.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a lot of that I do resonate with. I'm definitely a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I think we all are to some extent, right? So there's something about driving a car kind of hard and kind of fast and not beyond the limit, but getting a little bit closer to it that certainly, gets the juices flowing. But that said, I think for me, in addition, a big part of what makes driving so engaging is for me, it's a very cerebral sort of exercise of thinking how I can interface with this machine. As I mentioned, I'm an engineer. I think about machinery a lot and design and performance of these things and reliability of things and how I can connect to that as closely as possible and then get that machine to connect to the earth as efficiently and optimally as I can. So to me, it's a multivariate calculus problem with an optimization problem layered on top of that of try to, like, how do we get the friction to get us through this course as fast as possible without ever exceeding the limit.
Right.
So it's, the mathematician in me gets very excited about thinking about driving.
So it sounds like driving to you is sort of like an exciting game of problem solving.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. What is your view on automatics versus manual transmission?
I'm a pragmatist in a lot of ways. I think that, and this will actually carry over not just on the transmission question, but a lot of probably what we're going to get into today about EVs versus internal combustion engines. But there's pros and cons, right? There's going to be some things that are better with one and some that are better with the other. And where I tend to try to think about these things is I go back and imagine that there was no history. If we had no history of cars evolving a certain way, and then we were just going to invent the thing today, what would we do based on the best available technology? And the truth is we probably wouldn't make manuals, right? That wasn't true 40 years ago. It probably is true today. So I try to look at all of that as just what technologies are available and how do we get the best combination of performance, reliability, affordability, ease of use, all of engagement, all of those things with the best technology that we have today.
Right. And that just highlights how scientists think so differently from regular people. It sounds like you're chasing the scientific mathematical perfection.
That's how I live my life. Yeah.
Right. Is that how you feel, Ben, too?
As far as transmissions go, I grew up driving a stick. It's hard to explain why that feels so good, even if it's slower. I don't know. It's hard to quantify.
So which do you prefer?
Manual.
Got it. I always tell people that the order that I go into the corner, right? So I see the corner coming in the mountains and I calculate the braking distance. As I brake into the braking zone, I pray. And when I feel the yaw, I kind of black out a little bit. Right. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like hopefully I can make this. And out of the corner, I'm just literally be like so grateful that I'm still alive. And sometimes I'll even be like, just to exhale real quick. So I always ask people, like, if I were to drive a manual, and I'm not shy about me actually preferring automatics because I feel like, which part of that process can I squeeze in the shifting action? Like, do I not pray and shift? I mean, that's why sometimes people crash, right?
I haven't driven too many manuals in the past. The problem with automatics back in the day was that they were extremely inefficient. The gearing ratios were completely off. They didn't utilize the power efficiently. As time has gone on, we have things like DCTs, PDKs, ZF8 gearboxes that have been extremely efficient and extremely robust in terms of reliability as well. So it does beg the question, is the manual even necessary anymore? But at the same time, a lot of people want to enjoy that connectivity that a manual brings with them, that third pedal. For me, I don't necessarily care too much about the manual gearbox. I would like to get into one someday, but I'm happy with a DCT. I'm happy with the ZF8. They're perfect for me.
It's so interesting that there's been a lot of perspective shifts in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, I was still in school. And I remember when Tesla first came out, it was like the hip thing. It was a status symbol. You got a Tesla, you're a YouTuber, influencer, you're one of the Kardashians, right? And then as EVs became more and more popular globally, in the US market, kind of complicated. Well, isn't everything always complicated in the US market?
Understatement.
And especially in the last 5 years, there's been a ton of negative criticism and doubts about EVs, ownership, and also production. And we're going to address a lot of the main ones on this episode, but one of them being battery degradation, which basically means that if you buy an EV, initially the battery is at full charge, 100% capacity, but then over years, it might degrade and only hold 80% of the charge. Think about your smartphones, right? So some critics might say, well, EVs are sort of disposable appliances at that point, rather than the solid machineries that you can keep for 10, 20 years and put 500,000 miles. And that not only pollutes the environment, but if you want to replace your battery, then that'll cost you tens and thousands of dollars. Then at that point, you might as well just buy another depreciated EV. So how do you guys respond to that?
Ooh, there's a lot in that. I guess direct experience, I drove a Chevy Volt, as I mentioned, for 10 years, put over 100,000 miles on it. And in that time, the battery degradation was essentially not noticeable. I mean, it happened because batteries do degrade. Sort of by definition, it is degrading as soon as you start using it. But in terms of my everyday driving experience, I never noticed. Didn't make a difference at all in how I was using that car. The comparison to your smartphone is an interesting one because they use similar battery chemistry, but it's also a completely inaccurate one because smartphones don't manage batteries remotely the way that EVs manage their batteries, right? I've got a thermal management system in my EV that's making sure the battery is always at a temperature that it's happy with. Your smartphone doesn't have that, right? It's sitting in your pocket. It's sitting on your dashboard of your car, cooking in the sun. It's overheating. And the thermal things are part of what makes batteries degrade. So EVs, these manufacturers, they're pretty intelligent. They know what they're doing. They've done a lot of testing on these batteries. So the degradation, generally speaking, is not nearly as extreme as I think people are expecting it to be. The sensitivity to it and the importance that people are placing on that, to me, is actually kind of the same conversation as range anxiety, which we'll probably talk about, which is people are more worried about it than they need to be. Range of an EV is a factor, and it is one of the specifications that we're going to talk about on EVs. But most people I know who actually have an EV and have driven it for a while, especially if they've taken it on some road trips, they realize that it's not as important as they thought it was. Like, yeah, it matters, but it's not like the top line thing that you should go shopping for when you're going to choose one of these cars.
Right. And I find it really interesting how EVs, at least they show you what the maximum capacity is, right? So you can see the degradation on your screen. But for a gas car, you never know. You buy a used car, it's like, okay, well, how long would this engine last? I don't know, based on what I know about the owner or based on how many miles it has. So you're kind of like guessing a lot.
Yeah, essentially you're talking about efficiency, right, and the range of it. And as far as I'm aware, ICE engines also lose efficiency over time. Possibly, I don't have any hard data on that, but possibly at a similar rate to the modern EV. As our Polestars, I don't know, I'm not sure what your number's at, but the last time I checked my battery state of health, which is basically how much degradation there's been, it was at 92%. It's probably more around 90 now. The research is coming out that the battery dips a lot right after you start using it in the first 10,000 miles. And then the rate of degradation slows, especially if you take good care of it. But that's the same for an ICE car. If you take really good care of it, you probably don't see a lot of efficiency drop. I think these batteries are going to last a lot longer than people think. I think the Nissan Leaf, kind of gave the EV that reputation because it had, at least a particular generation, had a really bad battery degradation problem. I think only after a couple of years, it was like at half already.
Yeah.
So it's kind of got a stigma. Hopefully over time that'll go. I think you are going to see the battery management, thermal management keep getting better and better in these cars, and the technology is better and better.
Do you find a concern, I guess, in kind of the used market as a battery degrades? I would think that over time you would actually have to replace it at some point. And I've heard kind of stories or nightmares about how the replacement for some of these batteries can exceed $10,000, $20,000, maybe even $30,000, especially with the labor that's involved in it. Does that kind of drive a concern for you in terms of long-term ownership? Because I see, for example, Taycans just being dumped on the market, secondhand. And it's it's a little concerning, but it's also kind of a factor of the Porsche tax kind of thing.
I've spent a little time on the used EV market because I ended up actually buying my old Polestar back. I kind of see how the depreciation is, but I guess I have the faith that they've done a good job in their management technology, that they're all going to be pretty comparable. There is a way you can hook up a scanner to it and get that number before you take the plunge, but make sure you got a good state of health battery.
Right.
Yeah.
And they don't just tell you that on the screen.
Well, and that's what I was going to bring up, is that there's a lot of discussion that I've heard on some enthusiast forums and things where there's a push to try to require them to display that value to the user in an easy way, this state of health, right? So what's the current maximum battery charge compared to when it was brand new?
Yeah. You can get it if the car has an OBD too, you can get that on most of them.
Yeah.
Which is pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
And that's a classic example of if there's anything, just don't tell the public, because if you tell them anything about it, then they'll worry about it, right? The gas engines, you never ask, let's hook up something to see how many miles I can put on the engine. But even the engines have a longevity, for each one. You buy the same B58, they're not the same engine, right? But because you don't know about it, then it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be the same looking for an ICE car, a used ICE car. You don't know what the person's done to it and how hard they drove it, how well they maintained it. I mean, sometimes people keep maintenance records, but I don't know. Those are easy to forge, or if they have no records, but they claim that they were good about it, but you don't know. I mean, unless you get a scope in there and checking out the cylinder walls, I don't know really how you could tell.
Right.
When it comes to the cost of the replacement for that battery, if and when it does degrade to the point that you need to replace it, one thing that I like to think about is not just what the EV market looks like today, but where it's going to be in 10 years when, for me, that may become relevant at that point. Maybe the car's getting old enough that I have to do something. And, part of the reason these battery replacements are so expensive right now is because they're not done, right? They're so incredibly rare that there's not like an active market for aftermarket batteries. There's very few people that know how to do that work. The supply chain is sort of non-existent, right? So if you imagine we get to a point where there's just a mass adoption of EVs and there's a significant number of them on the road, and enough of them are getting old enough that these battery replacements are starting to happen more than, once a year, sort of globally, right? Like it's very rare right now. The price is going to come down, right? There should be recycled batteries, third-party batteries, all kinds of things to try to drive that down.
So there's definitely a market for like the used market, or not the used market, but the aftermarket, for example, to integrate and penetrate into the space and actually drive costs down over time.
I mean, my view on it is once there are enough EVs on the road and some of them are aging to the point where there's these sort of things become relevant, then that market will develop, right? Somebody will see an opportunity to make some money by doing battery swaps, and they'll go figure out how to undercut the manufacturer and do it at a lower price, right?
I think the manufacturers also need to get together and try to work on some standards and some modularity. It would be really cool if, the battery form factors were so similar and the output voltages and things across the board that you could take your pack and, replace the cells in it, or replace bad cells with aftermarket cells and just plug and play it right back into it.
Right. Or just give me a new car, 50% off. I mean, what's the big deal?
I'll take the depreciated Taycan. That sounds pretty good.
Now, what about the weight? Because EVs are heavier. And a lot of people say, hey, all the infrastructures like parking lots, bridges, they can't handle it. And you'll go through tires so fast, right? Can you speak about the weight? Can you feel it, Steve?
Yeah, no doubt it's a heavy car. I would say most modern cars are getting heavier and heavier, right? So it's not double the weight of a similarly equipped ICE car, but it is somewhat heavier. In terms of how that affects me on day to day, I mean, I burn through a lot of tires, but it's because I'm chasing this guy in the canyons. It's not because the car's that heavy. I mean, I'll tell you, my wife's EV has done almost no damage to its tires whatsoever in the amount of time that we've had it. So it's not purely a weight thing. I think part of it is that EVs, the pedal on the right becomes a lot of fun when you have instantaneous torque and a lot of power. Definitely, I'm going through tires like crazy. The weight is there. Good car hides it somewhat, but you can't make it go away. That said, it's another area where the sort of march of progress in these technologies, batteries keep getting better, the battery density keeps improving. That gap between the weight of an EV and the weight of a similar ICE is going to continue to narrow. My hope, and if anybody, like any of the product managers with the EV manufacturers are listening, maybe they can take a note here. Just put a smaller battery in. I actually don't need the range. I would rather have a 50 kilowatt hour battery in a car that's really light and nimble, and I just have to charge it more often, but it's going to be super fun to drive. Instead of putting a 100 kilowatt hour battery in there and it's just a big hog that doesn't want to go around corners.
Right. And off air, you also said that if that were to be the case, you can build more charging stations and make charging faster.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's a better solution instead of jamming in a bigger battery.
Yeah. After doing a number of road trips in an EV, in two different EVs, I've driven all over the Southwest US. My conclusion is that range is less important than charging speed. If you can just charge it faster, it's not that big of a deal if you need to stop every hour if the stop is like 5 minutes long, right? Because that's, this idea of an EV road trip is one of the objections a lot of people have. I think if we can just focus on charging speed to make those stops really, really short, it's actually kind of nice to get out and stretch your legs once in a while if you're driving 1,000 miles, So
Right, and also a smaller battery means that you can build more nimble sports cars.
Absolutely, yes. Please.
I think that's the case with Porsche, with the new Boxster, the new Cayman as well. They're trying to at least like drag the weight like significantly down. I think down into 3,600 pounds or so. Although I'm not too sure if there's a market for that anymore, because I think a lot of these manufacturers are also kind of going back and forth whether, should we go like fully into EV or should we start going into hybrid or just keep combustion engines alive at this point? So it's a little bit of a game that they're playing right now, but at least they're trying to make some progress there.
So I think that Ben is in the market for that.
Yeah, that would. I've wanted to get back to Porsche at some point, and I kind of said as soon as there's a good EV Porsche. The Taycan is it's big. And expensive, of course. So yeah, I'm really excited kind of about the new Cayman EV. Yeah, I would go for something that had a more limited range, but was light and nimble, and I could charge at the bottom of ACH and then have a couple hours of fun up there, and then cruise. On the way down, you don't really use much.
Yeah, you don't need anything to come down the mountain.
So there is a market for it, I think. I just don't know if it's big enough for mass production.
Right. And also I think that another, vital talking point is there are too much tech in EVs, making them gimmicky, and they don't have the staying power. But I think that off air, Steve, you also said that too much tech, it's not just an EV thing. That's all cars, all modern cars. And EVs don't have to have a lot of tech, but that just happened to be one of the marketing tools to get you in. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, one of the objections I occasionally hear from people about EVs is that they have this poor reliability. They read consumer reports and hear things that, these EVs have a lot of problems reported. And as I've done a little bit of digging, both what I've found looking around and also my personal experience is that most of the problems have nothing to do with the fact that it's an electric powertrain. It's not the battery. It's not the power electronics. It's not the motors. It's all the infotainment systems and the driver assist stuff and the 360 cameras and the GPS. And, a lot of it is the gizmos that get stuck into the cars. And, those things can go bad on an ICE car just as well as they could go bad on an EV. I think the challenge with EVs is that, at least in the U.S. market, there's been a marketing approach that the EV represents the sort of technological flagship of whatever brand is producing the car. So they put all the new bells and whistles into it. And it's the new stuff that tends to have the problems. It's the little software issues and all this kind of stuff. But that's not necessary, right? You could build a very bare bones, simple EV. There's nothing stopping somebody from making a Toyota Corolla that's all electric and has none of the features that wouldn't exist in a base model Toyota Corolla. And in other markets, they are doing those sort of things. It's just not, for whatever reason, that hasn't been the strategy here in the U.S. with electric vehicles.
Wow, it sounds like there's quite a bit of a prejudice against EVs. Like anything happening to them, it must be an EV thing.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think people have a skepticism about whatever's new. People don't like change. They get kind of stuck in their way, and then they kind of resist anything that seems new or different.
Right. I think that when EVs first came out, one of the talking point was it is environmentally friendly. We went from gas cars to hybrids to plug-in hybrids, and now it's full EV. And then now some critics are saying that, the production of EVs actually harnesses a lot of harmful chemicals and also rare minerals that are actually more harmful than if you just made a ton of gas cars. What do you say to that?
So this is a topic I get excited about because it's where it starts to overlap with what I do for a living, working in clean energy. And I've supplied a lot of power systems for large industrial users of energy like cement plants and mining companies and things like that. So I kind of see a bit about how that industry works. And there's this concept of a life cycle analysis where you actually look at not just the product, but all the raw materials and processes, manufacturing processes that went into producing that thing. And you count up all the energy that it took, all the carbon dioxide emissions that resulted from the production of that thing. And you kind of count that. And then you look at the use of it over its life. And this idea that EVs are worse for the environment than ICE cars are kind of a bastardization of what's going on with that life cycle analysis. People look at it essentially when it leaves the factory and they say, look, this thing had, whatever the percentage is, 15% more embodied carbon dioxide in it than an internal combustion engine car because it was so energy intensive to produce that battery. So these things are terrible. They're bad for the environment. We shouldn't use them. But the problem is that completely ignores the use of the car and the fact that an internal combustion engine is burning fossil fuels throughout its whole life and the EV is not. So if you actually look at the entire life cycle, the EVs tend to break even with ICE in somewhere between 2 and 4 years of use. It's about 20,000 miles. And it depends on all the details, right? Like, are you charging this thing on California's grid or West Virginia's grid? Because the carbon intensity of the electricity is very different, right? But the fact is they pay back pretty early in the life of the car. Considering most cars have a 20-year lifespan, it's definitely better off or better for the environment in the long run to use that EV. And the other thing that's relevant here is that as the production processes get better, they become more energy efficient, right? So actually making that battery requires less energy today than it did 5 years ago. So that gap is just narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. So this is really not an issue. It's definitely one of those sort of misdirects that because it's made a political football, people want to skew it a certain way.
What would you say on the impact of, I guess, the consumables in this case? So, for instance, tires. On aggregate, you can say, well, in a whole, ICE vehicles have contributed more to, rubber particulates out in the air, and these are kind of cancer-causing materials that happen over time. Whereas, I guess, proportionally in the current day, because of, I guess, the high usage of rubber and tires and such with EV vehicles, we're burning through more particulates with EVs, and that's just going to get in the air, cause, brain issues and cancer and what have you in the future.
Yeah.
I guess, what would be your counter to that?
There's no doubt a heavier tire or a heavier car is going to burn through tires, whether it's electric or not. I think it has more to do with the weight and how much power you're putting down. So there's a lot of pretty heavy, I could look at a Humvee and ask a lot of the same questions. It's definitely not an electric car. That said, just my sort of overly simplistic way of looking at it, but again, trying to think like a scientist, I start with how much pollution we're creating, right? Like what is the mass of pollution? And think about, because I've even heard the same argument with brake pads. Like think about how many brake pads, because the car's so heavy, it's like, give me a break. Like over the life of a car, how many pounds of brake pad are you going to destroy and put into, the atmosphere, the road, whatever? How many pounds of tire are you going to turn into dust compared to how many pounds of gasoline are you burning? Because when you burn gasoline, 100% of that mass ends up as vapors in the atmosphere, right? Either water or CO2. And most of it's CO2, not water. I'd start by just let's do an accounting of how many pounds of pollution the thing is putting out, and it's just not even close. The tire thing, again, it's a total misdirect by people trying to tarnish the reputation of EVs.
And I feel like there's so many things, like the drawbacks and also the pros of, either type of vehicles, right? But it just really depends on the public's preference on what to cherry pick on. Like if you speak of the gas car, well, the smell, that's, you breathe in all that exhaust. What about hearing loss from a GT4 RS going by? I mean, some people literally have their eardrums fixed because they were driving a Porsche GT3 RS. That's part of the reason why I didn't get it, right? So if you quantify how many hearts do you break? I mean, come on. We all know what BMW guys do. And then when you break a heart, you go to a restaurant and then you eat more beef because you have to take her out on a date. All of that is remedies. I mean, we're not talking about that. Oh, I just realized I'm a BMW guy now too. So I can't say that anymore.
There is a weird element of certain people who saw it as a threat. It's happened plenty of times throughout history. The original car was not immediately embraced, right? Didn't make sense until a certain point where the value and the convenience became sensible, right? But some people, they kind of see, I think they group anything that's clean energy as a thing that they have to be with the haters of, and it just makes them feel good to do that. I don't think they're being objective. I think they just, I understand, the thought of change sometimes can be, I don't know about threatening, but I remember, a specific example for me was full touchscreen phones. I was so anti-touchscreen phone when the first iPhone came out. I thought that was the most ridiculous idea I'd ever heard. I was like, I'll never get one of those. I like my buttons. I like my keyboard. I like, all those stupid things. And it, it just became the way after not very long. It was like, now I understand. As soon as I finally got one, I was like, well, this makes sense. I understand now. I think a lot of people are hoping that they can stick with what they like forever, even if it doesn't make as much sense.
On the subject of the environment, would you ever embrace, if it became a viable option, hydrogen power? I know that BMW and Toyota have recently entered into talks or an agreement about, I'm just going to call it hydrogen power, creating power plants for that together. Would you see that as a viable option in the future if it became accessible?
For me, absolutely not. I think that it's a way to keep us tied to a pump that's operated by somebody who's making money off it. I think that the option to charge this at my house with solar power is a threat to the people who provide energy to everybody. I think that hydrogen is just, it's cleaner. That'd be cool. Especially if you could convert a regular ICE engine to run on it. That I would be totally on board with, because then we could keep all the classics and maybe even continue production of these cars and just make them clean. That would be fantastic. Will that ever happen? Probably not. I like the idea of energy independence.
Socioeconomic piece and the sort of geopolitical piece actually is important, because talking about hydrogen, a lot of people kind of criticize Toyota for missing the boat on electric cars, right? They've been putting so much money into hydrogen. But if you kind of zoom out, there's a reason for that. It's because Japan as a nation has decided that hydrogen is likely a solution for their energy problem. They really have very little in terms of domestic sources of energy. Their solar resource is garbage. They don't really have many opportunities for good wind power. They have no fossil fuel production domestically. They import it all, right? So they're trying to figure out what can we do to create an energy system for ourselves and also have some amount of independence while also hopefully transitioning to something that's better for the environment. And their strategy has been hydrogen, either through renewable energy or actually importing it from Australia, right? They're talking about putting massive electrolysis plants in Australia, liquefying or compressing the hydrogen or converting it to ammonia and shipping it to Japan. And so there's sort of a consistency with Toyota saying, okay, we're going to plan for hydrogen being the thing because their government's telling them hydrogen is going to be the thing. Do I agree with all of that? No. Hydrogen is a great fuel unless you actually have to produce it, store it, or transport it anywhere. Then it's a real pain in the ass. So, all the energy it takes to produce the hydrogen, you lose like 2/3 of it by the time you're actually using it in the car. So for a transportation fuel, hydrogen's not good. The one possible exception that I kind of keep an open mind on is maybe a hydrogen fuel cell is a way to get EV performance without the weight of the battery. Like if we could find a really good fuel cell, which doesn't really exist yet today, and if we find a really good storage for the hydrogen on the car, maybe that's the way to get the kind of lightweight sports car that we're talking about, but with EV characteristics. It doesn't exist, but I'll entertain the possibility that that's a route.
Wow. Sounds like there's a fight for the future. I think that's a segue
Absolutely.
for a little break.
Sure.
When we come back, are EVs taking your job? Can EVs ever have a soul? You're listening to Sociology of Cars podcast. This is Jimmy XIE. Hey, listeners, you probably heard me mention our sponsor 0 to 60 a lot. I want to remind you that 0 is actually the word 0, numero 2, and then the word 60. 0 is the word 0, numero 2, and then word 60. Go on Instagram for more details and see a whole range of products that we offer. So, Jade, when you first walked into our studio today, what did you think of 0 to 60?
I feel like the amenities are fantastic over here. There's a simulation downstairs, and that allows people to come here, wait when the car is being worked on. And they offer many services over here that I would think any enthusiast or any car owner would appreciate.
Got it. Right next door, we have the PPF and vinyl wrap shop. We also do tinting. And downstairs, we have the 1,000 square foot sim racing facility, state of the art, and also a leather sofa lounge. You can host your private event, birthday parties, car meets, anything that you can think of. We probably have got you covered. And right next door to us, there's actually a printing shop. When you first walked in, there is a giant poster of a GT racing car with some city lights, and also in the office. Those are all from our printing shop. We can even make stickers for your car clubs. What did you think, Steve, when you first walked in?
My first thought was that if I hang out here and do this sim racing here, then my wife will be happy because I've been threatening to spend a whole bunch of money building a rig at home. So yeah, it looks like a lot of fun around here.
I love it. What's the best thing though is like you can, bring some food, drinks, play sim while getting your PPF done, right?
Yeah,
It's
true.
It's like a man cave.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, when I walked in, I was like, if I had a basement, I'd do something like this with it. Dark, computers, card setup. Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
Wow. Especially we're in a, kind of like the corner of an industrial place. That's like a man cave where you can just come and hide if you have a fight with your wife or if you just want to run away for a little bit.
That never happens.
And the studio that we're in right now is actually for rent as well. We can see through the gigantic windows into the first floor where they have a beautiful GR86 currently being PPF'd. So, what do we not offer here?
The prices look good too. I like that.
I think Ben is talking about the price of the sim racing. We're actually really competitive for what we offer. So just come check it out and nobody gets hurt. Wow, Steve and Ben, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. It sounds like the whole EV misconception is largely a propaganda. There's a lot of political stuff at play. So to the critics who say that EV production takes away jobs from the average Americans, what do you say to that?
I've got a couple of perspectives on that. I think one thing that I always remind people of is that if you actually look at the componentry that goes into the cars that are on our market and where those components are sourced and then how much of the assembly happens and all that kind of stuff, the most American car brand is Tesla. So it's exclusively EVs. Like the highest percentage of American content of any cars on the U.S. market is actually an electric car. So I don't think there's anything inherently about electric cars that take jobs away from the United States. Those are complicated decisions that are made based on economics, and it has very little to do with the choice of whether it's a combustion engine or an EV. The other thing that I would remind people of is that these things are going to change. Like there's progress being made, whether it's having to do with automation. We talk about robotics taking jobs away from people, whether it's EVs taking internal combustion related jobs away from people, whether it's clean energy taking away jobs from coal miners. And the thing is, political opinions aren't going to stop the march of economic progress. And so those things are just going to happen. And what you need to do is just evolve and roll with it. There's a quote from a German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, from a couple hundred years ago. He said that all truth passes through three stages, right? First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. And third, it's accepted as being self-evident. And I think that's kind of what's happening with EVs. Is like, this is going to happen. And when, 25 years ago, the EV1 and all that, we were ridiculing it. Now we're kind of in a stage where it's being violently opposed in some areas. Give it another 10, 15 years, and we're all going to accept that it's just self-evident that this is the way it's going to be.
Right. And I think that you also mentioned something about people used to ride in carriages, and the transition to gas cars was also a hard one.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of people that used to make the wooden wheels for horse-drawn buggies that lost their jobs when people started buying automobiles, right? That happens. And it's not that I'm trying to be insensitive about people losing their job, but it is the case that that's how progress happens. Like some new jobs are created while other jobs are sort of obsoleted, and you just have to retrain people.
Right. And I think that off air, you also brought up a really good point where even if today all the new cars are EVs, there are still so many gas cars on the road, maybe for the foreseeable 20 to 30 years. So a lot of the mechanics today, they still have a job because they still got to service all those cars.
Oh, absolutely. And if you think about not just the manufacturer of the car, but the service and maintenance and the like, the majority of an EV is still a car, right? You still have tires, you have still wheels, you have brakes, you have suspension, you have steering, you have all these things, all the interior, exterior, like they're all still the same car parts, right? So a lot of that really has no bearing on whether we're transitioning to EVs. But even the EV specific components, to your point, we've got about a 20-year backlog of the cars that are currently on the road before they all start to, expire their life and end up in a junkyard somewhere. So even if, tomorrow we said 100% of cars that are being sold now must be EVs, we still got basically 20 years to help people through that career transition to sort of phase out the jobs that are going to be lost and introduce the jobs that are going to be gained as that occurs.
Got it. Maybe we should also change how we educate the mechanics.
Absolutely.
Injecting some of that EV knowledge and coding knowledge to trade school, perhaps.
Yeah, and I would think that anybody that's signing up for an automotive program today is probably taking a lot of computer classes and diagnosing modern cars, not just EVs, but any modern car, is a heavily computer and software-based exercise, even more so with EVs. But certainly they'll also be learning how to deal with high-voltage electrical systems safely and that sort of thing. So anybody entering that field today, I would imagine, is going to come with the right skills to be able to work on both ICE, but more importantly, EVs, because in the long run, if they're starting their career today, by the time they're reaching sort of my age or beyond in the retirement age, it's going to be dominated by EVs.
Jade, you are a BMW enthusiast and your parents also own BMWs. So it's safe for me to say that you came from a lineage of ICE cars and you also track your cars. I know that you have some questions for Steve and Ben in regard to the enthusiast side of driving.
Sure. And just to add plenty of context related to this, part of the excitement when owning an ICE vehicle is to take a Canyon or a track day, or to take the Canyon or track day, is the capability to modify it extensively. This usually comes in the form of suspension upgrades, tires, weight savings, aero, exhaust, etc. Moreover, especially in like the turbo era, power upgrades have become heavily democratized to the point where a lot of vehicles can attain an additional 100 to 200 horsepower with minimal effort. A lot of people in the BMW community would call this, an email and a downpipe or something like that. But for naturally aspirated cars, the option to bore, stroke, added forced induction, or even engine swap are all viable options. Owners also have the option to trailer their vehicle, or drive it to the track or canyon day and expect to refuel their vehicles quickly. Thus, range isn't too much of a concern. The only anxiety I could probably say are the consumables, tires, and kind of like the engine temperature management as well. As they do things like put pedal to the metal, flat out kind of thing. On the other hand, it kind of appears that with EVs, you don't get too many options for power upgrades. Like basically what you buy is what you get in this scenario. And the main options are, suspension, tires, weight reduction, and aero. Additionally, the extent to which you're able to kind of enjoy aggressive canyon driving, like flat out, is kind of limited by the additional factor of kind of range and the anxiety that kind of follows with that. And, charging times potentially costing up to like 30 minutes to an hour. And on top of that, it seems as though like max power can be gated at how much your charge level is at, and also the ambient temperatures outside, whether the vehicle is actually sufficiently cooled or heated to the right temperature. So I guess just at the end of the day, with all that context and all that like frontal loading that I'm doing, why would you choose an EV over an ICE vehicle for enthusiast level driving? How do you circumvent many of these issues?
That is a lot.
Yeah.
I'm on Team ICE as far as mods go. Yeah, there's no equivalent. There's no EV that you can do the same level of things. However, I'll say that the first list of mods that you did mention, only one of those things was engine related. So there are a lot of things that can be done. I think the volume is so low. I mean, you see a good amount of Tesla mods, but for the other cars, I mean, there's stuff starting to trickle out for the Ioniq 5N, but they're really not selling that many of them. So you're not going to see a whole lot. That is something that is missing to me. When I had my T-Bird Weed, I got, almost changed everything. I never really got into the short block. So, we changed the intake, we upgraded the intercooler, we did all sorts of cool stuff to that car. And that was part of the thing that I loved about it. So, yes, that is a deficiency in that space for sure. However, we're, how far into real EV development are we at this point? 13, 15 years? I think that the first Model S, I would say, is the first like legit produced EV, like mass produced EV. When you're looking back at ICE cars, I mean, they've had 100 years more even. I think it'll get there. I think, like I said before, I think maybe the manufacturers have to get a little bit standardized. Why would I choose the EV? It still feels more direct to me. When I drive it, I feel instantly that steering is steering, but as far as power delivery, it's not just about the instant off the line torque, but any like movements. I'm a fan of one pedal drive. I don't know if Steve uses it much, but I like that I can have a single muscle group controlling my acceleration, and kind of like a joystick or something, an airplane or something. I can have it up and down.
Got it. What about you, Steve? How do you feel about the topic?
Pretty similarly. I mean, I think it's sort of demonstrably true what you said about the ability to make modifications, right? It's just not there yet. There's not a lot of aftermarket parts. There's not things that if I wanted to go swap out for a more powerful motor on my Polestar, it's probably just not even possible. Yeah. There's certainly not an easy way to go do something like that. So yes, 100% agree. The ability to modify it is very limited. And if you look at the things that I've done to my car, they're primarily cosmetic, right? I put lowering springs on it. You could argue whether that's cosmetic or performance related. It's mostly cosmetic. I wrapped it. I tinted the windows. I'm doing those sorts of things. That said, Polestar did offer a performance software upgrade, so I downloaded an extra 50 kilowatts into it. Sorry, 68 horsepower. I prefer kilowatts. So agreed that the modification culture around cars is not there yet with EVs in terms of performance oriented modifications. That's absolutely true. To the question of why I would choose to take an EV into the canyons or onto the track, the pragmatic answer is that it's my daily driver and I don't have parking available for another car. I've already got 2 in the garage and 3 on the street, and it's just not happening. But also I think it is it is a ton of fun. And, you know, everything that Ben was saying about the engagement and the sort of instantaneous feedback between your inputs and what the car is doing, it is more connected in an EV, I believe. There's no lag on anything that you do. So that actually is a lot of fun. And I think once you sort of take your mind shift around what are the constraints that you need to work around and just sort of accept that that is what it is in terms of range and charging and things, it's not that big of a deal. I can have a lot of fun in the canyons and still get home with enough charge that I didn't have to stop somewhere halfway. In terms of track days, I can, 20 minutes on the track, that's like 40% of the battery, and then plug in until your next session. So you got an hour at the charger and you got time to get back before the next session on the track day. And you can sort of just kind of barely keep up with what's going on by doing that. It severely limits which tracks you go to. So as of today, it's pretty much, in Southern California at least, it's Button Willow or nothing, but it's still a whole lot of fun.
Willow Springs is okay, but yeah, you may miss a session.
It's like 20 miles each way. That's, that's kind of like borderline.
So it sounds like it's all a matter of perspective shifts, right? Because a lot of the hardcore the manual people say that that's the determining factor to a car's engagement. Well, somebody else might just enjoy like the yaw and the problem solving, managing the brakes and the tires. So who are they to say what's engaging about a car? You write your own story. I always say to people like manual or not, or if you can hear the engine or not, those are only two aspects of so many things that makes a car fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is we have positive associations based on the memories that we created while experiencing those things, right? So you love the sound of that engine, you love the sound of the exhaust because you were happy when you were hearing it. And there's a whole lifetime of those like positive reinforcements. It's not because the sound of that exhaust actually makes the car better. Like objectively it doesn't, right? Like the sounds coming out are actually robbing energy. Like that's sort of wasted energy that's not going to the tires. But you've got a lifetime of like good vibes that go along with that sound. And so if you can manage to develop those good vibes with a different sort of sensory environment of an EV, I think you'll find it actually very engaging.
Right. So it's almost like a social construct, what people find fun or what people would define as fun in a gas car.
When you look at those two things in particular, the sound and the manual transmissions, those were, just two solutions to a problem that came with that technology, right? Unmuffled ICE engine is deafening. So we're like, well, we got to solve this problem. And then it became an art form. And then, a single gear on an ICE engine was totally impractical for any speed over, 15, 20. So they solved another problem with something that, just kind of build, and then an art form became of it and it became part of the experience. But they're not, to me, like key essential parts of driving. But like what Steve said, when you have that lifetime of memories of that, it becomes it.
Just building on top of that, these are all just cultural normative like shifts that we're just going to make into the future as we go into a new era of like car ownership. I mean, even for myself, I know that a lot of people would say like, oh, for example, for my F87 BMW, they would only say, well, you can only find true enjoyment if you had a manual. But I kind of disagree with that assertion, only because I feel like the DCT in this case, there's a lot of personality in it. There's a lot of quirks that make it a little bit interesting, especially I think a lot of people will kind of like with a DCT will kind of resonate with this kind of like first gear hop that it does, where it doesn't really want to shift into second gear. And I think that as annoying as it is, it gives the car for me like a little bit of character. And I'm just like, okay, well, I enjoy this. It's kind of like a positive like reinforcement kind of thing for me. And I think this kind of gets to the heart of like my next question, extremely subjective. But part of car ownership enjoyment is the idea of a car having, quote unquote, a soul. This can manifest in the form of kind of like engine intake, exhaust notes, NVH kind of sounds, transmission feel, the shifting through the gears, the quirks, et cetera, steering feedback, brake feel, what have you. As time has gone on, ICE vehicles, like especially ICE vehicles, there's a lot of like flack that especially BMW, like modern BMWs have gotten, where the inputs have become numb. Everything is drive-by-wire. The systems behind it are just, there is no connectivity to the road. You don't get that feedback from every bump, every nook and cranny that you feel. As a result, it seems like ICE vehicles are becoming soulless over time. Full disclosure, when I say that EVs are the logical endpoint for soullessness, I say this mainly in the context of Tesla. In a lot of sense, there's zero NVH in a lot of these vehicles. There's no engine note. Some of the inputs are kind of artificial, and as they are with modern ICE vehicles as well. From anecdotal accounts, it appears that the biggest source of joy EV owners have is kind of like the initial kind of like torque feel, that 0 to 60, just that initial like push that you get out of it. Over time, that might become a little bit old. Is there a soul in an EV vehicle? How do you inject or find soul in an EV? And what would you find the solution to be to adding soul in modern vehicles in a world that's becoming increasingly numb? I'm not just talking about ICE vehicles or EVs. I'm just talking about in general.
I feel like the soul argument, I mean, it's an anthropomorphic thing, right? We give it what we feel, right? I think that you can give a soul to almost anything you really love, or alive or not. I loved my Polestar so much that I didn't just go buy another Polestar. I went and I found my Polestar. Like, I loved that car more than I could explain at the time, and I had to have it back. And it has a way about it that's unique to me that I've never felt before. I think that could be a soul of it. And I think what drew me to the Hyundai, and I like that they're pushing that, and they're trying to bridge that connection between a enthusiast who likes the sound, who likes the gear shifting. I mean, they went so far with it. It's really amazing how accurate they made it with all the different. It can hit the red line. It'll kick when you shift. It'll, if the wheels spin, the revs will go up. So it gives you that audible connection that helps with, everybody always talks engagement. And so does that give it more soul than my Polestar? I don't know about soul. It definitely has like a character difference, right? It's I don't know, more youthful, more wild than the Polestar, which I appreciate its kind of classy simpleness. And so I think the cars, they still can carve their own path. And I think that they can have a soul as long as we have that connection and give it to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought to imagine whether EVs are going to have a soul. Here comes the scientist again. I'm not even sure humans have souls. I think I would be hard pressed to state that with confidence. But I think really what you're getting at is a strong positive feeling of association with something, and that I think can be built with EVs. I mean, just hearing Ben describe how he's experienced his, I believe he's entirely genuine and does have a connection with his cars that like what you're describing. I certainly feel that way about mine. It's no doubt different, right? So the ways that you're going to build that relationship with the car are going to be different based on a completely different sensory environment that you're within. It's not going to be based on growl, and the instantaneous response to me is more than 0 to 60. It's actually when I need to pass somebody, like 40 to 80 is way more exciting than 0 to 60 as far as I'm concerned. So it's there, and it takes time, and I think you create a relationship with the car. So soul, I don't know. That's a loaded word, but it's got a definite personality, and I feel strongly attracted to it. So I guess maybe that's soul.
It's interesting how you said it was a loaded word, right? Because the people asking the questions are usually gas car owners. So when you say, does it have the soul, you forgot to add one more word to it. Does it have the soul of a gas car? No, it does not, but it has the soul of an electric car, right? And we are the ones creating the memories. So it's just like a different type of soul. And furthermore, I think maybe the better question to ask is, are you happy driving it? Or do you enjoy it? And if the question is yes, then there is a soul.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to quote my Gen Z kids, don't yuck my yum. Right?
I love that.
Like, I love the thing. You love your ice, that's cool, but don't hate on my EV.
And some girls even name their wallets and their Birkins, right? So you can argue, well, it's just a bag. Well, some people say there's a soul. So really it's really up to you.
We ascribe meaning to something at the end of the day. We just need to have mutual respect for each other's,
Totally.
likings and wants. And EVs are getting into a space where I think a lot of, combustion engine enthusiasts are getting a little bit uncomfortable, especially when it comes to the performance aspect of things too. We're seeing Taycan Turbo GTs with the Visac package, like just basically blitzing Laguna Seca like a few seconds off from the McLaren Senna. So people get a little bit wary of that, and then they start just attacking EV owners after that. I think it's a marvel of engineering at the end of the day. we wouldn't have gotten this far in, the production car space had it not been for pushing the limits of what a particular platform can do. EVs are definitely making waves. Now, we're all having our last hurrah with combustion engines, but I think we need to start embracing, future alternatives.
Right. Wouldn't you say that maybe a part of the fear came from ICE car owners thinking, oh, EVs are going to replace what we like. But if they coexist, I don't think anybody's going to have a problem, right? That's where things really get political. So that being said, my final question to you both is, based on what you've seen so far, are EVs the future? Is this inevitable?
Yes.
Even despite all of the political pushbacks?
No, I think it's going to be a technology like everything else. But I don't think the internal combustion will go away, maybe ever. I think that there'll always be a niche, and I think they will be allowed to make them at a certain volume. I think there's something about them, at least for a while, until most of the people have moved on to the next realm. But I think there are some products people still make that are old school. And
got it. So it's kind of like the wristwatch, right? Even though we all use digital watch now, but you still pay a premium for a wristwatch.
There you go.
I mean, is that Rolex really worth $10,000? I mean, come on. What about you, Steve?
Absolutely, yes. It's inevitable. And, political opinions don't bend the laws of physics, and it's pretty clear where the technology is going. We are already at a point of price parity between EVs and an equivalently equipped ICE car in certain markets, notably China, and in the US and in Europe. That's forecasted to happen 12 to 18 months from now. We're like right there. So for the majority of car ownership, and we're talking about commuting and taking the kids to school and just driving as a utility, yes, I do believe that EVs will be the dominant form of transportation in the future. When it comes to enthusiasts and collectors, I think, to Ben's point, you will continue to be able to purchase your ICE car and you can listen to your vinyl records while you're driving it because it's the same damn thing, right? It is demonstrably worse, but there's nostalgia for it.
They have a warmth to them. I don't know what you're talking about.
So they'll be around. They will coexist, but if you're talking about just the lion's share of just transportation as a market and a means to get from point A to point B, it's going to be electric.
My only problem with this transition, right, is like, because I was born in 95. So my first car was a Toyota Corolla, very bad 4-cylinder with a CVT. My second car was a turbocharged 4-cylinder, which I was feeling really high class when I got that CX-5. I was like, now I have a turbo, right? And then I got into a Miata, which is a NA 4-cylinder. And I feel like, okay, one flavor of each. I like to take things a little bit slow. And now I have a Beamer, right? German-made 4-cylinder. Just when I'm thinking, okay, my next one, I'm going to finally tap into the 6-cylinder. You tell me that EVs are taking over. It's like, hang on, give me 5 more years for the 6-cylinder. Let me jump to the V8 and then V12, and then I'm done. But see, both of you have had the time to really experience all of that in your lifetime, perhaps.
I think you'll have 5 years. It's not going to happen overnight. This is a transition, and it is going to take time. But in 15 years, you're going to be driving electric.
I'm not particularly scared. I'm going to drive my ICE vehicle till the day it dies, basically. But, it would be nice to have an EV kind of like daily, too, because there are some benefits to that, I'm sure.
Well, that's the thing with enthusiasts, right? All the people who say, oh, save the manual, save the V8. How many manuals did you buy? New car. Unless you buy a new car that has a manual or a V8, you're not supporting the cause. So manufacturers didn't see a business case, right? Put your money where your mouth is. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insight today. I think you guys may have convinced me to maybe get an EV in the future. I learned a lot from all of you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to thank our listeners for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Sociology of Cars podcast is produced by Sociology of Everything, supported by 0 to 60 Studios in San Dimas, California. This is Jimmy XIE. We'll see you next time.